Okay, thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. On behalf of Women Ascension and Climate Action and Sustainability Department, I warmly welcome you all today in today's session dedicated to advancing climate leadership and sustainable solution. Women Ascension is commitment to empowering women and youth through education, leadership, and global cooperation. Our Climate Action and Sustainability Department focuses on raising awareness, promoting environmental responsibility, and inspiring innovation solutions for a green and more sustainable future. My name is Tahmina Dawari, and I'm honored to serve as your moderator today. I'm currently serving as the Executive Assistant at Women Ascension, where I support global initiative, coordinate programs, and contribute to empowering women and youth through leadership and education opportunities. It is a privilege to be part of today's important conversation. Now, it's my great honor to introduce our mentor, Mr. Daniel. Mr. Daniel stands at the critical intersection of technology, energy, and biology, and is recognized as a key contributor to Denmark ambition green transition. His career began with the architect in digital system that helped define the early Internet of Things and has since evolved through designing industrial and biological system that supports sustainability and environment transformation. Born in Hamburg, Germany, and now based in Denmark, he represents visionary leadership, deep technology expertise, and strong commitment to shaping sustainable future. Please join me to warmly welcome Mr. Daniel. Mr. Daniel, thank you so much for joining in. Now the floor is yours.
Thank you for those very kind words, Tamina. So let me see if I can share my screen. So can you see my screen now?
It's still loading.
Okay, it's a big picture.
Okay. Yeah, we can see it.
You can see it. Very good. So basically, can you also see my mouse, the pointer? Maybe not.
Your mouse? Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Very small. So today, what I've taken as a basis is this one picture to get the discussion started. Because on our road to not using any fossil fuels anymore, I think it is important to understand how would our future energy system look like. We have, of course, the backbone of the energy system is hydroelectric, where you have dams and reservoirs, and another solution is where you have basically at the bottom of a hill, you have a reservoir, and at the top, and then when you want to charge, you basically pump up, and when you want to discharge, you pump down, so you use water as a type of battery. This is a very good battery. However, the problem we see even also in Scandinavia and Norway, for example, is that the weather is becoming more unpredictable, and we can have longer periods with drought, so where we have less rainfall, and therefore we will have less energy in the pumped hydro or the hydroelectric energy system. I think with the current unfortunate situation in the world, what makes sense is to have a more resilient energy system, so that right now, most energy systems are top down. So you have the grid, the transmission system, and the transport of electricity is very centralized. So when something fails, then the entire system basically fails. But we can actually do something about that. And each of us can basically start having smaller systems For example, in a house, if you have solar PV and you have a home battery, or you have a car which can be charged but which can also give energy back to the house. And then when you run something called island mode. So what you need to realize is when the electricity, if you have a battery, you have to disconnect your house from the grid, because otherwise you will send the electricity out to the grid, and then you will get what is called a brownout. But imagine if you have multiple homes which are each separated. So you then have a district where you maybe work together. So these homes, if they are all up and running and they can all have enough power, you can have a district storage, battery storage, and the whole district could run in island mode. Or what we are also looking at in Denmark is, can a whole municipality actually run in island mode? So this is because people are afraid that we get more and more outages when we are moving away from oil and gas. What you will see is sometimes there is no wind and sometimes there is no sun. And then in these periods, if you don't have enough storage in the system and you cannot source your electricity because maybe there is a failure in the grid, you will need to separate your big system into smaller systems. Of course, also when in uncertain times, like we work with some municipalities in Ukraine, you will need to have more resilient power systems. So smaller sections which can continue to run, even though the bigger systems are maybe non-functional anymore. And then when you have these renewable power systems, what you will see is at times when the wind blows, for example, on this wind onshore farm, it will also blow here. And what you see is you get too much electricity in the system, actually. And what you then see in the European market, where the price is determined on the availability, then when you have too much wind, it means you will have to switch some of these wind turbines off. And the more this happens, the longer time it will take to actually earn your money back from the investment of the wind turbines. And that means we will need to probably also have, besides batteries, we will also need something called power to X. So power to X basically can take electricity and take water, split water into hydrogen and oxygen, and then maybe make ammonia from this or methane from this. You can also use biofuel and biomass, and you can actually upgrade biofuel and biomass into more potent biofuels. And you do that by means of hydrogen also. And then hydrogen is, I call it sometimes a terrible molecule, because it is the smallest atom that we have in the universe. And that also means it can go through most materials. It can cause something which is called embrittlement. So it degrades the storage tank which it is in. And therefore it can make sense to actually use hydrogen to upgrade biofuel and then store that instead, because you can even make drop-in replacement fuels. So you could, in theory, generate diesel or gasoline from the biofuel and the biomass. However, this is a really, really energy intensive process. So, for example, for hydrogen, if you take electricity, you split the atom, and then you compress the hydrogen, and then you use a fuel cell to make it into electricity again, what you have left is only 40% of the initial electricity which you've had. So the round trip efficiency is very low. And I think that was my opening speech, very short, but I hope this maybe causes some of you to have some questions, so I can we can together find solutions and maybe together yeah, learn something.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daniel. This is the picture is really beautiful, to be honest. It's really clear that what's happening, what you want to tell them, how they should understand. So I think now participants can drop their questions so we can carry on with the session, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Dear all fellows, please drop your questions so Mr. Daniel can answer it.
Yes.
Let
Don't be
me okay. Let me put the first question because I'm really confused about this and curious. Um, I think you can read it from the chat box.
Yes, let me open that. Oh, so from your experience, what are the biggest barriers preventing people, especially youth, from understanding and adopting renewable energy solutions? So when you recall the picture which I showed, what you see is there is a lot of elements in the picture. There is solar PV, there's home batteries, there's the grid, there is vehicles, and I mean, I haven't even drawn any industry into this picture. So, and this is a very simplified picture. So the problem is really that there is so many options to go with, and so many details to know. So it's not a simple choice. So I think, and then of course there's also the cost. I mean, solar has been reduced drastically in cost, which is very good, and also battery storage has been reduced drastically, but there is still a certain cost. So the bigger the solution and the longer or the more benefit you want, the more expensive it is. Especially, yeah, electric vehicles are still rather expensive. So I think there's multiple reasons for the youth why they don't yet adopt it as much. So it's about learning more about it.
For sure, Mr. Daniel. Yes, it is. We have more question on the chat box.
Yes. So in a country facing frequent load shedding, would distributed grids be a practical solution? Why or why not? So the grid, for example, in Denmark, when it was built, maybe 50 years ago, it was dimensioned to actually support 5 times as much electricity as was needed, because they thought, okay, if we can handle a peak of 5 times the normal, then we surely must be safe. However, what we see now in Denmark is that because more and more electric vehicles are adopted and more industrial processes are electrified, actually the grid is reaching its limit. So I think I mean, like for 5 years ago, Denmark was one of the most stable grid in the world. We had almost zero power outages. And in the last year alone, I think we've had partial power outages like almost every month. And this is because certain parts of the grid are becoming unstable. And when you have more and more parts in the grid becoming unstable, then you can have the problem of a cascading effect, which brings down the entire grid. So therefore, having a segmented grid can be a good idea. Also, when you transport electricity, you will both need the investment into the grid to upgrade in copper, which is rather expensive. But if you have a segmented grid where you know, for example, close to the onshore or the offshore wind farms, close to them, you have maybe a power to X facility, which can always consume the surplus electricity. Then you will stabilize the electricity prices. You will have less loss in the transmission system, and you can then generate the e-fuel for the yeah. So even in a system where you are shedding electricity, a distributed grid still makes sense. You still do need the overall grid though, because you want to probably transport it to further away. I hope that answers that question. Should I go to the next question? How can
Yes,
models
Mr.
like
Daniel.
these be adopted for Africa? Well, I think in Africa, where you in some areas do not have a well built grid, actually it makes sense to start with the segmented way to maybe start with a few houses, so you can maybe in a school or maybe in a hospital, and then you can expand from that, and by collaborating, so building self-sufficient units, but which can be switched together or connected, grow it slowly bottom up instead of top down. Because what you have to realize is, the grid we now have in Europe, we didn't have that 150 years ago. So the way it started was bottom up. So we had small units, which then became bigger and bigger, and then they started being interconnected. And only later, in maybe the 60s and the 70s, 1960s, 1970s, did we start to have big power plants which would supply huge areas of cities. The bigger the unit, the bigger the city, the harder it will be to start with these segmented areas. But I think for the areas in Africa where the grid is maybe not so well built, it could be a very good way of giving a better resilient grid, because after all, you do have enough solar typically, and having batteries can then give you power during the night. During the day, I don't think that should be necessary. And I think you should be able to build it bottom up in this way, and then run island mode when there is a problem somewhere else, so that a village can continue to operate. How can young people and women become active contributors and leaders in the renewable energy transition? Well, I think technology is not really male or female dominant. However, what I think maybe could be the strength of women is the power of collaboration and sharing. Because if you share and connect multiple systems together, then together you are stronger, and together you can maybe distribute the cost more easily, and you can do a shared system. So I think the sharing part and also the health part, because when you are burning, be it wood or oil or even gas, you will have more air pollution. So the air pollution is unhealthy for anybody. And I think taking the stance that clean air is something important, and that how should I say it? Yeah, collaboration, clean air, and distributed infrastructure, which is common or community owned, um, could be some very important areas where I think women could make a difference. Okay, what regulatory barriers prevent communities from generating and selling their own electricity, especially looking at South Asia? Oh, wow. So I'm not an expert in the regulatory barriers of South Asia. What I do know is more the European barriers, and maybe they are similar, but often the problem to connect to the grid, there can be huge regulations. For example, in Germany, you were for a long time allowed to connect balcony solar power panels, and now this is forbidden. And it's because the grid is usually made in a way that the normal operation is that the electricity comes from a big power plant and then it is distributed out into the single homes. But now, with the increasing number of solar installations in homes, what you see is the electricity flow is reversed, and that can cause problems in the grid. So usually that's why there are often regulations. And there is also another problem, which is called feed-in tariffs. So when you are feeding electricity in to the grid, it's not always possible to get actually the money that it's worth. Also, when you have older electricity meters with the rotating disc, Ferraris electricity meters, they are good for the people who are feeding in because they will actually run backward. But the electricity companies don't like it very much because it means they will earn less money. And of course, because electricity companies often are monopolies and are often also owned by the state sees it as a good revenue, forgetting the benefits for the overall economy by maybe having a more resilient grid and cheaper electricity. So, how can rural communities benefit from renewable energy systems? Well, I think especially rural communities, they can benefit because they often have the space. So they can be the renewable electricity power plant, and which there's not as much space in the city. There's also some benefits because you can, for example, still have agriculture between the solar panels. So you can have animals grazing, or you can even plant certain plants. And the solar panels, when they are standing, they even give shade to the animals. So it can in some ways increase the productivity of the land because they will now start producing electricity, which can be sold, and they can still produce certain crops or maybe animals. So I think, and of course, if there is an unstable electricity supply in the rural area, they can maybe become self-sufficient in this way. Environmental governance plays a crucial role in shaping sustainable futures. Based on your experience in Denmark's green transition, could you explain how strong governance frameworks enable successful climate action and what lessons other countries can learn from these governance models? So, very good point. What you need to realize is that it's not only governance, it's also money, because you will need to invest. It's especially in the beginning, it is expensive to get started. But the Danish government has a very strong view on that they want to be climate neutral in the year 2050. So for that, they are looking at what are the barriers when we are installing renewable energy, and what are the barriers when we are looking at storage, and especially at the storage side. There are stupid regulations, like, for example, when you have only a battery but no solar PV, you are not allowed, you can charge when it's cheap, but you are not allowed to sell when it's expensive. So that is directly bad for the transition. So from the government side, they are looking at such barriers and are trying to actively remove them. And there they work with organizations like mine, but they also work with the industry to find out where are the barriers. And so it's really the vision, and it goes with the technology, it goes with the research. Sometimes people say we have all the solutions. Maybe we have parts of the solutions, I would say, but we do not have all the solutions, because whenever you do something concrete, the problems are always in the details. So it helps working with concrete solutions. It helps working with a vision, like the one I was showing in the picture. So where do we want to be? Let's say in the year 2050, we don't want to use any fossil fuels. Then you need to imagine how does this future look like? What are the implications? And to get to this future, what do we need in order to get there? Because some of these infrastructural things, they will take 15, 20 years to build. And now we're in the year 2026. So the time is running out. And I think even Denmark, even though Denmark is ambitious, Denmark will not reach its goal of carbon neutrality in 2050. So yeah, difficult question, not easy to answer in a short, concise way. What are the most urgent environmental governance challenges the world is facing today? Ah, I think it is the current situation in the world is very, very unfortunate, because when you look at wars will always increase burning of fossil fuels. It destroys infrastructure, and it consumes huge amounts of energy, which are fossil fuel based. Also, the way that the American government is acting, saying that climate change is a hoax, is very unfortunate, because you will see other governments say, okay, if they don't do anything, then we won't do anything. So I think it is very urgent to remember that why we have to do something. You know, maybe some of you, that I wrote a book about how CO2 affects the human body and the human intelligence. And just today I read an article which actually exactly confirms my argument that we are born into a world where the CO2 level is far below of what we have today. And we start seeing people get illnesses related to increased CO2 levels. And sometimes I'm wondering if all this craziness in the world is also caused by lower intelligence due to higher CO2 levels. This is a very, very terrible and concerning aspect. So challenges are really that we are not collaborating and that we are not making the right decisions and that no one is really doing enough. I think the United Nations is really trying, but it's not successful. So I think more people need to shout out and fight this. What role do communities play in distributed energy ownership and management? So also a good question. The what you see often in some countries where you have a lot of renewable energy is something called the not in my backyard NIMBY effect. And that basically says that, sure, we want renewable energy and we want solar panels, but we don't want it as our own neighbor. But someone will have it as a neighbor. When you, however, have the community involved and the community also benefits, probably monetary wise, but also from maybe other services, then you will see that there is a better willingness to have renewable as your neighbor, because when you feel, okay, if there is an outage, we don't have a problem because we do have the solar panels next to our community. Or we want the solar panels because we earn some money from them and our sheep get some shade, then that is also a benefit. So it is important to not by governments push this upon communities, but rather have communities want this, then you will have a much better and faster transition when there is a true benefit for the community. How can youth and entrepreneurs contribute to decentralized energy innovation? Well, I think, as I said before, not everything is solved. And often the problems are in the detail and the problems are in the locality where you want to implement the renewable energy. And here I think the youth have often more entrepreneurial energy. And when they learn about what is possible, where can we source certain things? So make it concrete and learn and try to see if you can kickstart something in your own community and see if you to get a group of people together to fund a project and try to learn what it means to run in island mode and yeah, learn about the benefits of a more resilient energy system. You've worked at the forefront of Denmark's green transition, which is often considered a global success story. What specific governance decisions, leadership commitments, and long-term strategies made this transformation possible? And why do many other countries struggle to implement similar changes? So I think Denmark has multiple advantages. So Denmark is a small country. Denmark is a country which is based on the foundation of that we are a knowledge exporting nation. So they like to be at the forefront of technology. And Denmark also has a geographical advantage because of the geography, we have a lot of wind. So in Denmark, the wind turbines have an incredible 45 to 48% of efficiency. That means that the theoretical maximum of 100%, they produce that energy of 48% of that, which is really high. And so these things together mean that Denmark was in a very good position to go this way. So being a first mover, being innovative, and having the wind, which means that's why you have Siemens Gamesa and Vestas, two of the largest wind turbine manufacturers in Denmark. And in Denmark, the government also had a willingness to risk something upon the green transition, saying that we have to lead the green transition. This was a choice which was made early on in Denmark. So, and Denmark is a very social country. So we have good social benefits, social welfare, and a very good equality. So there's not the super duper rich, sure we have them, but the average living standard is very good. And this goes through the whole system. So these things are difficult to change, I think. Comes from the mentality, the history, and the way the country is ruled. How can community participation strengthen environmental governance? Well, I think community participation should demand clean air. It should also demand a stable grid and improved living standards. And it should demand that the things that pollute should be taxed and the things that do not pollute should be cheaper. So there is something called the polluter pays principle. But it also means you need to have an option as a community not to pollute. So when you have no electricity and when the renewable alternatives are really expensive, then of course you will default back to the polluting alternatives. But a community which can show how it can be better and how it can have a positive influence on cleaner air and maybe also less polluted fields, because when the air is polluted, your crops will also get polluted. I mean, in the 70s, we abolished lead in gasoline. And before that, there was lead in all crops, and lead is a toxin. It's a neurotoxin. So you were able to measure this in children and in adults, and this is just not acceptable. And I think a an educated, active community can strengthen the environmental governance by demanding improved environment. Could you explain the importance of environmental governance in addressing climate change and protecting our planet. Well, I think it's a bit, I've touched this, and we need more people speak up about this, because in many countries it still matters what the population says, and every voice is important. And the more voices we have that speak up and that say we have to change, the more will change. So I think in Europe the voice is very strong, but in other parts of the world it's maybe not as strong. So I think yeah, again, educate yourselves and demand that something has to happen, because the way we are moving right now, um, I'm afraid that we are facing an extinction, maybe only in 200 years, so we won't see it, but it's not going in the right direction. And you see it already with increased droughts and heavy rains, and from one extreme to the other. And the more people demand a change, I think the more it will help. So that's all I can say to that. The planet, we are many people, over 8 billion people, so it's very hard to change such a super tanker. A city wants to balance rapid urban development with environmental protection. What governance strategies would you recommend to achieve sustainable growth? Well, I think we can in cities really learn from the errors of the past. So having all this concrete and no nature and no trees is not a good idea, because trees in the street will benefit the climate in cities. It will regulate the climate. And also, to have more environment in, you need to have corridors, green corridors in the cities. And I think this is good for the environment, and it's also good for the people living in the city. And yes, it takes more space, but it will also improve the the quality of life for the population in the city. So I think you see that more and more cities are actually implementing green corridors. And I think when you are planning new areas of a city, you should take that into account also, and and give access to both nature and the people to some areas where you plan not to build buildings. If you had the opportunity to advise global leaders directly, what would you tell them is the most urgent priority they must address today in renewable energy and environmental governance? And why can this no longer be delayed? Well, I think I would say we have to make a plan to phase out fossil fuels. And for my part, this plan can, let's say it takes 25 years, but this has to be an absolute number. So we take the reference, let's take this year or last year, 2025, that would be nice. So whatever we use 2025, we have to reduce the consumption of fossil fuels by 4%. If we did this like a hard, no, there's no alternative, and said this is how it will go, then the industry would know, oh, we need to change. And what you probably would see is that the industry would say, okay, the first ones to change will have the biggest benefit and they will take that market. So we would accelerate the transition by very much. And yeah, we would, I think it sounds so simple, and I think that is actually what we should do because it would give clarity to the industry that there is no other way. We will reduce the amount that they are allowed to use. And if you use it, it would drive prices of fossil fuels very much up. And I think that that would be my advice. How can renewable energy policies be designed to ensure both environmental protection and economic stability? Um, Renewable energy policies. Well, that's a difficult one because actually they are not necessarily contradictory. But what you need to have is that a bit less cleanliness maybe around the renewable energy sites. So the solar and wind farms, they can actually function as areas for increased nature. So and in wind turbines, they have also found out that by, for example, painting one of the wings black, then the birds can much better see the wind turbine and will not fly into it. And of course, the land below, if you don't use it for agriculture, then you can have a nice it can improve the environment. Also, having, for example, solar farms or wind farms on areas um, which are very important for groundwater can be a part of improved environmental protection. Because if you have um, a solar farm, maybe you don't use as much pesticides or nutrients for the ground below because maybe you have sheep there, then you will also protect suddenly the groundwater. So, but these are when the energy system is already complex, taking biodiversity and environment in makes it even more complex. So it's not a simple solution, and you always need to look at the area where you want to uh, implement this. Is technological innovation alone enough to solve the climate crisis, or is stronger governance more important? I don't think technological innovation alone is enough. We do need stronger governance. Just like I said before, we should have a plan to really phase out fossil fuels and leave them in the ground. So, yeah, that's my short answer for that. That's alarming. How can we amplify climate change issues among other pressing issues in continents such as Africa? I think it is again about explaining why this is important. I mean, when you look at Nigeria, a country which is very much hit by climate change, it is also a very big fossil fuel producer. And this is, of course, yeah, for a poor country, it's the money which counts, and it's easy to say they should not do this, but ultimately, I think for example, the European Union is trying to reduce the use of fossil fuels, and the same is true for China. So I think China is actually aware of the problem and trying to change. And ultimately, when you reduce the market for fossil fuels, then this will also have an impact on Africa. But I think again, Africa needs alternatives then to the fossil fuel, which brings money in. And there, I think, I mean, we will always need food. We will always need fruit and things like that. And I think that is, yeah, maybe a bit vague, but it is hard to make it more concrete. I think yes, educate and look for alternative opportunities in Africa. If you earn more with, for example, agriculture or maybe with technology or with electricity and making power to X. I mean, the the fuel of the future, which we will need, will be based on renewable energy. And where you have the energy, you should also produce these fuels. So there is an opportunity for Africa to also produce e-fuels because Africa does have the sun in certain areas of the continent.
Yes, Mr. Daniel, yes, you're right. I think someone from our participant is raising their hands. Ms.
Okay.
Ruba?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was waiting for the African continent because as someone who's in Africa and who's tried to talk about sustainable tourism and climate change, and particularly from Zimbabwe, where we also had our own fair share of climate change impacts in 2019. It really happened. It hit hard from Cyclone Idai, and thousands of people died, but it was ignored because we have other several issues that are hitting on the news that are affecting us. So whenever you try to bring up the topic of sustainability in individuals, in leaders, it is often overlooked or taken as a second priority. There's mining that they look forward for it to be the engine of the economy. There's agriculture, there's everything else, but how do we do it sustainably? And the politics of the countries in most African countries overshadow the topic of sustainability, but it's happening right now. How do we drive our leaders to talk about sustainability in the same table as they talk about the politics or as they talk about the economics of countries that are in Africa? So that's where my eager is on to say, how do we have the voice of climate change be heard in Africa by African and African leaders? And I thank you so much for how you've been handling this whole topic. Very informative for all the other aspects. I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have all the answers. So no one has all the answers, I think.
Fine. Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, you're welcome. I guess we're also about through. My mouth is rather dry now from talking so much.
Yes, Mr. Daniel, thank you so much for your answers. We had asked a lot of questions. If I count them, it's I think 20 or 25, maybe. Even I have not answered the question. Yeah, I feel thirsty too. So if you want, Mr. Daniel, we can conclude the session.
Yeah, I think that's. I think we touched a lot of subjects.
Yeah.
So a lot of good questions and very difficult to answer questions, some of them. So yeah, I hope you learned something.
Yeah, we have learned a lot, Mr. Daniel. As I said, we always learn something from you. and it's always a pleasure to have you here with us. So, as we conclude today's session, I want to extend our deepest gratitude to Mr. Daniel for sharing his exceptional knowledge and vision with us. Your insight on renewable energy literacy, the importance of strong environment governance, youth and women's leadership, and the urgent need for systematic action have been truly inspiring. Um, I, full, I fully agree with your points about engaging communities, bridging knowledge gaps, and the critical roles of governance and education in driving real changes, and also about the collaboration for the women. These lessons are not only motivating but also actionable for all of us. They remind us that every step we take toward sustainability matters. Thank you for not only educating us, but also inspiring us to think bigger, act smarter, and lead responsibility in creating sustainable future. On behalf of Women Ascension and Climate Action and Sustainability Department, we are truly honored to have had you with us today. Your contribution will leave a lasting impact, and we sincerely thank you for this invaluable session, Mr. Daniel.
You're welcome. Have a nice evening or morning or whatever you are.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daniel. Please have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice night. Bye bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.